Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I think it's time for Montreal Canadiens fans to panic. You see, Kent Hughes has had a pretty good track record of drafting guys in the first round, and you could even say that that track record extends to the Marc Bergevin days. Cole Caulfield, Uri Slafkovsky, Caden Gooley. Say what you want about Logan Mailloux, but the Canadiens traded him for Zachary Bolduc. I think it's a decent trade, all things considered. But one of these first-round guys that the Montreal Canadiens had drafted recently has just faced another bad setback. And it's one of these situations where I think at this point, you can't help but feel bad for the guy, for the story, and in a way for the Montreal Canadiens too. I get it, it's hard to make videos like this talking about it from a team's point of view without acknowledging the difficulties it must be for the player, but today we are talking about a guy who has been, in a sense, made of glass the past few years, and it seems like things have gotten worse. For David Reinbacher, that's right, Montreal's 2023 5th overall selection, a guy who was supposed to be the next coming of Moritz Seider. Big, right-handed defenseman, maybe not the most offensively productive guy, not a player that's going to go out there and score 60, 70, 80 points a year like Elaine Hudson, but a guy whom you could give 29 or 30 minutes of ice time to any given night, and he can just be reliable to shut opposition down consistently. A brick wall, an immovable object, a lifeline on the back end. But the problem is, David Reinbacher has had quite a few difficulties ever since being drafted by the Montreal Canadiens. His draft plus 1 year in Switzerland was bad, but it wasn't bad because he was bad, it was bad because the team was the worst team in the league. He then found himself in North America, where he wasn't able to play for most of the year because of an injury he had sustained in the preseason. Now, this year, he's got 14 points in 33 Laval Rocket games, on pace for 27 points over 64, which is fine. The production is okay for a guy who's technically in his first full North American season, but David Reinbacher was also hurt at the start of this year, too. He had only just recently returned. Now I say recently, 33 games played isn't like an absurdly short time. But things got even worse yesterday for David Reinbacher against the Calgary Wranglers, when he had the puck in the corner and he tried to go behind the net. He then got approached and body-checked, hard, might I add, by the Flames forechecker down low. And the way in which Reinbacher landed, you could tell that the guy was shaken up. He ended up leaving the game. This was at the end of the second period, pretty much. So Reinbacher, of course, missed the rest of the contest. And it was announced by the Laval Rocket that Reinbacher would not return to the game. Now there are concerns as to whether or not he is in concussion protocol or what have you. Now, full disclosure, I'm recording this audio on the night of Saturday, January 24th, and I'm a little bit sick myself if you couldn't already tell. But David Reinbacher is in a pretty tough spot yet again. Assuming he's going to be in concussion protocol for a while, and that he's not just going to hunky-dory return to the Laval Rocket lineup tomorrow, this is a guy who's suffering yet another big injury after the knee problems that sidelined him for a good chunk of the last 2 years. I think it's very reasonable for Montreal Canadiens fans to now all of a sudden start asking themselves, is this a long-term piece that the Montreal Canadiens can work with? Is this a guy that will be able to fight for a spot in the roster and sustainably do the job that he was drafted to do? Or is this a guy who will not be able to break past the AHL because he's not even getting the proper exposure and development down there because he's always hurt? There were some folks in the quote-unquote trade David Reinbacher party earlier on in the season. The fact that the Montreal Canadiens have been very good this year begs the question as to whether or not Reinbacher's long-term presence is really that valued when you think about what you could get in exchange if you traded the guy today. If you traded him to a team that's looking for youth, for a team that is interested in shelling out some of their win-now pieces, Is there a trade to be made? Let's say St. Louis calls. They want right-handed defensemen because, unfortunately, Logan Mailloux is not it. Could they trade a Kyrou for a Reinbacher? That was the proposed package back in the summer. Although I do question right now. I don't think it's direct, like, oh, St. Louis would still have that same offer on the table. They would obviously be made aware of the injury issues and the tribulations Reinbacher has gone through, because I think ultimately this is a guy who has certain value, but every new injury brings that value down and down. And we've seen this with other NHL players in the past. I'm thinking about Philip Hedl and the Vancouver Canucks. That's a very direct example of how trade value, supposed trade value, can decrease with every other year. Not because the guy isn't progressing, but because every year the guy gets a new injury that pushes him one step closer towards retirement. Not to say that David Reinbacher is going to do that. I mean, he's, only 21 years old, so obviously we want to wish him a long and prosperous NHL career, especially as a top 5 draft pick. But I'm just saying, for the Montreal Canadiens, this is a team that maybe doesn't really need David Reinbacher at this moment in time. Long term, you've got Noah Dobson. He's inked on that right side as an anchor. You have Alexandre Carrier providing some value, and you've got a bunch of left-handed dudes that are also signed on for a while too, to potentially play on their offside. Gooley, Hudson, Matheson are all a part of this decor, and with that in mind, the question as to whether or not Montreal just has too many guys available is fair to ask, and therefore opens the possibility as to whether or not a Reinbacher trade should have even been done sooner. I know a lot of folks wanted to see him gone, but now that he's gotten yet another injury, assuming this one is a long-term injury, it might just become a lot more difficult to make a trade like that work. And whatever price you could have gotten for him, Jordan Kyrou, whatever, it's like, I don't know if that's available anymore. Now, I don't want to blame the player, right? You could also say, oh, if he had gotten traded earlier in the summer to St. Louis, for example, who knows if he plays for their farm team, does he get hurt in the same way he did for Laval this season? Does he continue to get these injuries? Does he continue to have these obstacles in his development? The answer very well might be no, and that's possible. I do think that's reasonable, and if you were to say, in some alternate reality, David Reinbacher is a surefire bet to being an NHL player by the end of this season, then okay, that's great for him. But I guess in this current timeline, it's hard for us to figure out whether or not that's actually possible now. Assuming, of course, he stays injured for a while. If he does come back, then okay, great, this entire video is pointless. But assuming he does stick around in concussion protocol and he doesn't just return right away, I do question whether or not this is the ultimate damper on David Reinbacher's long-term success with the Montreal Canadiens. So with that in mind, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about David Reinbacher and this situation, this hit, concussion protocol, whatever? How do you feel about this player? What do you think his long-term future looks like? And is it going to be with the Canadiens? Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.